found, and certain disciplinary actions were recommended by ENS Forensics arising from their investigation. During the course of the investigation by the PPSA, a provisional report dated November 2014 appears to have been issued. It's unsigned. It is in the name of the former public protector, Advocate Madonsela. The status of this report and who exactly it should be attributed to is a matter which the next witness is going to testify about. The PP finally issued a report in relation to this investigation in February 2018. This report is the report number 31 of 2017-18. In her findings, she found that there were, in fact, procurement irregularities, and there was a failure to comply with National Treasury prescripts. In her remedial action, the PP required the Premier of the Free State to initiate and institute disciplinary proceedings against all implicated officials in the Mkhwebane Dairy Farm project. On the 20th of February 2018, the DA launched court proceedings seeking various forms of relief, including a declarator that the PP had acted unlawfully and in violation of a constitutional mandate. The DA also sought the review and the setting aside of report number 31 of 2017-18. Later that same month, KSAC also launched proceedings seeking the review and setting aside of the report. The applications were based on the same facts and they were heard simultaneously. Judgment was handed down on the 20th of May 2019 by Tolme J. The court declared that in conducting her investigation and reporting on the Mkhwebane Dairy project for the purposes of her report, the PP had failed in her duties under sections 6 and 7 of the PP Act and section 82 of the Constitution. The report number 31 of 2017-18 was then set aside and declared to be unlawful, unconstitutional, and invalid. The court reserved judgment on costs. This judgment was reserved pending the Constitutional Court judgment in the PP versus SAB matter, which dealt inter alia with an award of a punitive costs order by the High Court in that matter against the PP in her official and in her personal capacity. The Constitutional Court handed down judgment in July 2019, July 2019, and after that, the High Court then handed down its judgment on costs on the 15th of August 2019. The PP was then ordered to pay 92.5% in her official capacity of the costs of the DA on an attorney and client scale, including the costs of 2 counsel. A similar costs order was made in her official capacity that she pay 92.5% of the costs of KSAC, also on an attorney and client scale. And in her personal capacity, she was ordered to pay 7.5% of the costs of the DA on an attorney and client scale. And similarly, in her personal capacity, she was ordered to pay 7.5% of the costs of KSAC on an attorney and client scale. The PP applied for leave to appeal, appealing both the judgment on the merits and the judgment on costs. The hearing before Tolme J happened on the 11th of December 2019, and he gave judgment on the 13th of December 2019. In his judgment, thanks, Ms. Bofo. In her judgment, she dismissed the applications for leave to appeal against both the judgment on the merits and the judgment on the costs. The complaint against Advocate Mkhwebane in relation to the Mkhwebane Dairy project are concerned both with the manner in which she allegedly conducted the investigation and also the manner in which she allegedly conducted herself during the litigation. In this regard, as members will be aware, she is allegedly, she's said to be guilty of misconduct. As members will be aware, that those are the specific charges that are placed there on the monitor. She narrowed the scope of the investigation. 4.1 and 4.2, she failed to investigate at all. The third complaint by Mr. Jankelson. And then it goes on to say that the steps taken by her in the conduct of the investigation were wholly inadequate, considering the magnitude and importance of the complaints. And of course, it is then said in 4.4, she materially altered the remedial action proposed in the provisional report prepared by her predecessor. And then 4.5, it is said that in statements that she made under oath in the litigation, her statements were contradictory, her explanations were contradictory. Her affidavits in that litigation are found in bound A, page, her affidavit in the DA matter is on page 1581 to 1658, and her answering affidavit in the KSAC matter, bundle A, page 1829 to 1870. And so I will hand over to Advocate Bauer to take this witness through, having provided that brief background as to the context of this witness. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Mayosi. I recognize Advocate Bauer.
Mr. Chairperson, the witness that we are calling this morning is Mr. Sipelo Hamilton Samuel.
Thank you. Thank you, Advocate Bauer. I'm going to ask Ms. Fatima Ibrahim to interact with Mr. Sipelo Samuel. Ms. Fatima Ibrahim.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Samuel. Could I please ask you to state your full name for the record?
Sipelo Hamilton Samuel.
Thank you. Mr. Samuel, you have been invited, subject to the provisions of Section 16 of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act 2004, to appear before this committee as a witness and to answer questions in respect of the committee's inquiry into the removal of the Public Protector, Advocate Mkhwebane. Please be informed that by law, you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry, notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a House or committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to evidence or documents required in these proceedings. Please be aware that in terms of Section 17(2) of the Powers Act, a person who willfully furnishes a House or committee with information or makes a statement before it which is false or misleading commits an offence and is liable to a fine or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 2 years. So you will now be required to take either an oath or to affirm that the evidence you are about to give is truthful. You may choose either the oath or affirmation. Which do you prefer?
Yeah, I prefer to take the oath.
May I ask that you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I swear that the evidence I shall give
I swear that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
So
truth.
help me God.
So help me God.
Chairperson, the witness is now duly sworn in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ibrahim, and thank you, Mr. Samuel. I now recognize Advocate Bauer.
Good morning, Mr. Samuel. You provided the evidence leaders with an affidavit, and you have a copy of that affidavit before you, correct?
That is correct, Chair.
There is also a previous affidavit which was provided, which you had provided to the Speaker of the National Assembly on 11th February 2020.
That is
What was
correct.
deposed on that date. Right. Now, just so that those who are following virtually, the affidavits are in bundle D, The first one, to which I'm going to spend a considerable amount of time with, is located at page 2069, item 8. The second affidavit is located at page 2747. Mr. Samuel, you are an attorney of the High Court of South Africa, correct?
That is correct, Chair.
You were so admitted in April 1995.
Correct, Chair.
You hold a BProc degree from the University of KZN, then University of Natal, and you've practiced law and worked briefly as the executive officer of the Law Society of the Free State.
That is correct, Chair.
Now, you joined the Office of the Public Protector on 1 December 2000.
That is correct.
Joined in the capacity as a senior investigator. You held that position for 9 years, and thereafter you were appointed as the provincial representative of the public protector in Limpopo.
That is correct.
Right? And you stayed there until 2015, whereafter you were transferred at your request to the Free State Provincial Office as provincial representative.
That is correct.
And you held that position for some 20 years prior to your dismissal, which we will deal with in greater detail later, correct?
That specific position I've held for 11 years, but in total I've been in the employ of the Public Protector SA for 20 years.
And not to leave that hanging, subsequent to that, you've been reinstated.
That is correct.
And we'll deal with those details as we go on. So you are one of those persons at the Office of the Public Protector that had served under all the public protectors.
That is correct, Chair.
Mr. Samuel, I want to deal in the first instance with the matter which Advocate Mayosi had dealt with, and that's the Vrede Dairy matter, which starts in your affidavit at page 2116 from paragraph 30 onwards.
Paragraph 130, yes, that's correct.
Now, this was an investigation that had commenced during the term of Advocate Madansala. Correct?
That is correct, Chair.
And it had not yet been completed when the investigation had not yet been completed
That is so.
by the time she had vacated the office.
That is correct.
Right? The report which Advocate Mayosi had referred to was a report that had actually been published by Advocate Mkhwebane in February 2018, correct?
That is correct.
Right. Now, when did you first have any involvement in the Vrede investigation? You transferred to the Free State Office in 2015.
In the investigation, I became involved when I transferred to the Free State Provincial Office in 2015. But prior to that, I had sat in what we called the think tank, where this report was presented during Advocate Madonsela's time. And so I knew about this investigation then.
So a report had been presented to the think tank during Advocate Madonsela's term.
That is correct.
Right. And by virtue of your transfer to the Free State, did it now fall under your supervision of the investigation?
That is correct.
And who was the assigned investigators?
The assigned investigator was Advocate Celia. She was assisted by some investigators in the office.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could we just ask the IT people to make sure that the affidavit comes onto the screen, please?
Okay, IT, you got that? Applied the presentation. Thank you.
So you indicate in paragraph 132 that at the time you had taken office in 2015, there was a draft of the Friede report dated November 2014, which had been prepared by Advocate Cilius.
That is correct, Chair.
What happened to the draft thereafter?
The draft was referred back for further investigation because Advocate Madonsela was not happy with the fact that it was not wide enough to include the role of politicians in the matter.
And how did you come to know that Advocate Madonsela was not happy about that?
First, it was in the think tank before I transferred to Free State. And then when I was in the Free State, she spoke to me to take charge of the investigation and explore the role of politicians.
Okay. So in paragraph 133, you say that a further draft was prepared in 2016. And what transpired with that draft?
Yes, that is correct. Advocate Madonsela was still not happy with that draft. And she again sent it back and said, and requested that, as I said, that I take charge of the report and expedite and make sure that it covers sufficiently the role of politicians.
Okay. Now, Mr. Samuels, you referred to a draft prepared in 2016. And if we turn to page 2200, which is SS6. All right. Can you identify this email that you see at 2200?
Yes, Chair, this was an email sent by Advocate Celia to me and copied to other members of the Free State office, which were attached a number of reports for the think tank, and amongst those reports was the Friede dairy report.
And if you go to the next page, is this an extract of the report that was attached to the email?
Yes, that is correct.
And if you turn to page 2000, well, actually you can stay on the page where we are, 2203, in the top heading. The date still says November 2014. Can you explain that, Mr. Samuel?
This report was the initial report. I mean, the reference to November 2014 was the reference to the very first report that was submitted to the think tank. But, further drafts will still reflect that date of November 2014. They were not quite updated to reflect the period when they were revised and sent through.
Okay. And if you go to paragraph 2217. Page 2217, sorry. If you go down, further down on the page, right, you will see whose name is signed at the end of, is typed in at the end of that report.
Reflects the name of the public protector, Advocate Mkhwebane.
And it says she's assisted by the Free State Provincial Office.
That is correct.
Right. And so if we take you, and why was that at the time as such, Mr. Samuel?
Excuse me, could you repeat the question, please?
Why, how come her name was at the end of the report?
It was on this report because she had already been appointed as the public protector.
Okay. So when Ms. Celia sends this email off on the 14th of November 2016 with the draft report attached, Advocate Mkhwebane's name is at the end of the report.
That is correct.
And then if you go back to page 2117 of your affidavit, you say that paragraph 134.3, you say that this is the report this is the same report that was filed in the court proceedings, the provisional report.
That is correct.
Right? Except, and what difference is there between this report and the report that is annexed to Advocate Celia's email?
The difference is that it was the same report as the 2014 draft, but the one that was used in the proceedings reflected, and that was filed by Advocate Mkhwebane, reflected Advocate Madonsela at the end of the document.
Right. And had there been changes made to this report since Advocate Madonsela had left office?
No.
Okay. And had Advocate Madonsela signed off on any provincial report?
No, she had not.
And did this draft address Advocate Madonsela's concerns?
No, it did not.
And why not, Mr. Samuel?
There was a further investigation still underway, specifically to address Advocate Donsella's concerns, which, as I've said, were specifically to look at the role of the politicians in the whole free and dairy matter.
Okay. Can we just ask the IT people to put the affidavit back on the screen, please?
IT, are you winning? From Zoom. Yeah, I'm referring to them there. Thank you. Just a little bit of patience. Is that the one you're looking for, Advocate Bauer? Your mic, please.
Yes, thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
So you had the 2014 report now in 2016, and then what did you do after that, Mr. Samuel?
The investigation was still ongoing, but what I then did was to inquire whether Section 79 letters had been sent to Head Office Quality Assurance Unit. This was at the request of the Public Protector, that those Section 79 letters be sent with a draft report as Advocate Matlawe, who was doing quality assurance of reports at the time, indicated to me.
Okay. And so Advocate Saliers sent you the draft, and if you look at page 2218, this is the email requesting the draft. And if you look at the bottom of 2218, go down further. Advocate Saliers says at the bottom, these were the ones sent after the TT approved the report. What does that mean?
It suggests that the report, the draft that was sent and discussed at the think tank was approved by the PP, when in fact that was not the case. It was just discussed there but not approved. Hence it was sent back.
And you then sent the letters on to Advocate Matlawe.
That is correct.
Right? And he then forwarded those drafts. If you go to SS9, those drafts were then forwarded at 2221. You see at the bottom that in February 2017, there is an email. You see it, Advocate, Mr. Samuel?
Yes, I see it.
And it says, dear PP, from Advocate Matlawi to Advocate Mkhwebane. The attached are draft documents which relates to the Vrede matter as raised by Minister Zwane yesterday. Do you know what that reference is raised by Minister Zwane yesterday?
I was not party to any meeting with Minister Zwane, but I took it that this could have been a meeting that was held at head office with Minister Zwane.
These documents have been going to and fro because your predecessor felt that Free State did not address the issues that were raised with her. So at some point it was a futile exercise to submit them to her because she was expecting Free State to make specific findings, which it seems was not captured in the Section 7I notice and the draft provisional report. Further than that, these documents were not drafted in accordance with the relevant formats approved, so we would still have to send them for non-compliance. I hope this clarifies the matter to you, PP. We can still discuss the documents if we need further clarity. Does that accord with your understanding of the position at this time, Mr. Samuel?
That is correct.
Then, if we go to page 2119, para 139 of your affidavit, there is then a stakeholder consultative engagement which takes place and the PP comes to the Free State in March of 2017. Do you recall that, Mr. Samuel?
Yes, I do.
And what was the purpose of this visit?
This was a process that had been initiated by Advocate Madonsela during a time where she would go around the country once a year to meet with the stakeholders. These were divided, the stakeholders that she wanted to meet and engage with were politicians on the one hand and members of the public. And the public protector Advocate Mkhwebane continued with that practice. So this visit in March 2017 was one such visit to the Free State.
And was there any specific requests made for any particular visit she was meant to have at that stage?
No. Oh, well, there was a request made or conveyed to me, apparently made by the then Premier Advocate, Mr. Ace Magashule. We were working with the officials from the Premier's office to arrange visit to the legislature during this roadshow. And they conveyed a message to me that I should convey to Advocate Mkhwebane.
Okay. And did you do so?
Yes, I did. The message was that the Premier wanted to meet with Advocate Mkhwebane before she goes to the legislature the following day.
And what was her response?
I remember we were in her hotel suite as part of, I was there as the representative from the Free State office who had to brief her on the process and the itinerary for the 2 days that she was there to visit. Other people that were present were the CEO at the time and people from head office. I recall that one of them was the spokesperson at the time, Ms. Khalalelo Masibi. But her reaction, to come to your question, was that she doesn't take instructions from him, she doesn't know him, and she is not going to go and meet him. And she also asked me whether I had met him. And I said no. Since I transferred to the Free State, I had made attempts to meet with him just to introduce myself, as I'd done in the Limpopo, province, as part of introducing myself to the leadership in the province, and trying, to seek cooperation with our investigations.
What then transpired, Mr. Samuel?
A few minutes, we went on with the briefing, and a few minutes later, she received a call. I don't know who had called her, but she then walked to the one end of the room and took the call. And on her return, she said she had changed her mind, and said she would go ahead and meet the Premier, and that she would introduce me and the then CEO to the Premier. So she then instructed that we should meet her the following day at 7 in the morning, or 7:30, I can't remember correctly, but to meet her at the Premier's office. And we left it at that. We agreed. I then arranged with the then CEO to pick him up at his hotel the following day to go to the Premier's office as instructed. On our arrival the following day, the Premier's office, Advocate Mkhwebane and her security and the driver were already there. We were then ushered in to go to the 4th floor, which is where the Premier's office was located. On our arrival on the 4th floor, the Premier's PA was already waiting for us, and she ushered Advocate Mkhwebane, to the Premier's office, and myself and the CEO, we were ushered to the waiting room.
And then what happened?
She had that meeting with the Premier, and I think it must have lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. And then she came out and went, I think the Premier escorted her to the lift and she left. Thereafter, the Premier came to the waiting room and introduced himself to the CEO, and thereafter just walked away. He didn't interact with me at all.
Did he acknowledge you at all?
Not at all.
And you actually don't know what the conversation was that ensued between the Premier and the Public Protector?
No, I don't know.
And did she tell you anything?
No, she did not.
And anything that you could only speculate as to what it's about? You have no personal knowledge as to that conversation?
I do not. I do not have personal.
And did she relay any information to you after this meeting about the Vrede matter?
No, she did not. But sometime later, she indicated that she had made some undertakings to release that report and started following up on the Vrede dairy matter.
And what was the nature of those undertakings?
The nature of the undertakings.
Yes.
It was that she had made an undertaking to release the report and that it would be ready by the end of April. I then assumed that this undertaking must have been made or might have been made during her meeting with the Premier.
But she didn't say anything to you coming out of the meeting?
Yes, no, she didn't.
And if you go to SS10, which is on page 2223, there is an email dated 27th March 2017, where the PP says, I made a commitment that the following reports will be ready end of April by Free State PPSA. 1, Vrede Dairy, and she says, I want to visit before we finalize the report. Let's issue the 7-9. 2, Glasela, 3, Taxi Rank, and 4, website. Were those 4 reports outstanding at the Free State?
That is correct, but the only reports, all the reports were being handled by the Free State, except the website, which was done at head office.
Okay. But it related to the Free State?
That is correct.
And then if one looks further on that page, there is then an endeavor for her to get a date together to come and visit the Vrede Dairy project, correct?
That is correct.
Right. Right. You then, if one looks at page 2121 of your affidavit, you say that the Advocate Matlawi then sent the draft from the Provincial Investigation Unit at head office, together with the section 7-9 correspondence to be reformatted. That is the same documentation that is annexed as SS9, correct?
That is correct.
And attached to Advocate Matlawi's correspondence was another draft of the report. You refer to that at paragraph 141 of your affidavit. You see that, Mr. Samuel?
Yes.
Mr. Samuel, for the purpose of the record, you must answer so that the...
I thought the question was still following my,
Oh,
my
sorry.
apologies.
And did you get this draft, Mr. Samuel?
Yes, I did.
And what was the difference between this draft and the one that Advocate Silius had circulated earlier?
It was the same, with a few peculiar changes.
And You deal with that at 141, at 2122. And what were those changes that you're referring to?
The public protector was referred to as TN Madonsela instead of Mkhwebane. And it also reflected that the public protector had been assisted by Erika Silie and Tsiamo Muchumi rather than the Free State Provincial Office.
And why do you describe that as being peculiar?
It was peculiar because the public protector at the time was now Advocate Mkhwebane, firstly. And the directive that she had given subsequent to her taking over, as, to her appointment as the public protector, was that reference should not be made to individual investigators that had assisted the drafting of the report. It must instead reflect the originating office. Hence, it should have said Free State Provincial Office.
And were the names reflected, which you see at 2241, were the names that were reflected, were they investigators at the Free State Office?
That is correct. Erika Silie was a senior investigator and Tsiamo Muchumi was the investigator in 10 at the time.
And when this document was sent on the 27th of March, 2017, were they still both there?
No, only Advocate Silie was still there. Tsiamo Muchumi resigned in April 2015, a month after I transferred to the Free State.
So do you know how this change came about, putting the name back?
I don't know who, how the changes came about. Yeah.
And did this draft reflect the changes that Advocate Madonsela had wanted to implement?
No, it did not.
And in every other respect, this draft the same as the one Advocate Siliers had sent previously?
That is correct.
You then, if you go to SS12 at 2242,
Yes, I'm there.
right? You then sent an email, and what's attached to this email?
It was the Section 79 letters in respect of the Friede Daring investigation.
And it also says in the attachment's formal report, Friede 13 March 2017.
That is correct.
Right? And so the report was also attached to it. Right?
That's correct.
You then say there is a scheduled visit by PP and team of the farm on the 10th of April 2017, and I hope our observations will not affect the report and letters as they stand. What did you mean by that?
I cannot quite recall what the issues were, but because the investigation was still incomplete, I might have been referring to issues that the public protector might want to be included or might not want to be included in the report. For us, it was still a draft, which had not incorporated the concerns of the previous public protector.
Okay. And this draft report that you sent is attached to your affidavit marked SS 13, and it starts at page 2243 of the affidavit.
Yes, that's correct.
If one looks at it, these comments on the right-hand margin, are those formatting changes?
That is
Right. And if you look at the heading on the top of page 2244, the date has now changed. It's no longer November 2014. Isn't that so?
that is correct.
It now says March 2017,
That's correct.
right? And what was the changes effectively on this report that you can recall?
The changes related mainly to the structure and the format of the reports as required by Advocate Mkhwebane. She required that report or the draft presumably in preparation for a visit to the Vrede Dairy Farm, which was to take place in April.
Okay. And how, and had the investigation at that stage been completed as yet?
No, it was not.
What still needed to go into the report?
The role of the politicians still needed to be considered. I had made attempts to engage with the Premier. The politicians that were referred that were relevant to this investigation were Premier Ace Mkhwebane and Minister MEC at the time, Mkhwebane. So I had made attempts to get to interview them, and they had not cooperated.
And what else did you do? If you look at paragraph 145 of your affidavit, you describe certain steps that you had taken on page 2123. Can you tell us what those steps were?
The steps I took were to consider the only relevant information available to us at the time, which was the information from the legislature's Hansard, some public speeches and speeches that both Mr. Mkhwebane and Mr. Mkhwebane had made in the legislature and in the public. There was also evidence that we had received from officials employed in the Provincial Department of Agriculture, including the head of department. But the other officials were not willing to come forward. They feared reprisals. I also took into account the information or the evidence that was collected by Advocate Cilliers. And at the time that we went for the inspection at Vrede, I requested the public protector, requested permission to her, from her to that we should issue a subpoena against the politicians because they were not cooperating with us.
In which way were they not cooperating?
They were not responding at all to our advances to either meet or provide information regarding Vrede.
And as provincial representative, could you issue the subpoena against politicians?
No. The directive was that any subpoena against politicians at whatever level would have to be issued by the public protector, but against officials, including the HODs or DGs, I have the delegation to issue those subpoenas.
Right, and so you say you then had a site inspection at the Vrede Dairy.
That is correct.
Right, and when did you make this request to the public protector to issue the subpoenas?
It was during that, on the day of the inspection, as we were being taken around the dairy farm.
And what was her response?
Her response was that she does not want any findings made against politicians. And so she declined my request to prepare the subpoenas for her signature.
And what was your view on the matter?
I accepted her directive at the time and knew that I could not take the matter any further. So I had to rely on what was available to me.
Right. And what did you then do? The PP on your evidence said that she didn't want any findings against politicians.
I did not persist with my request, so I then prepared a draft and made findings against, or adverse findings against both politicians, to the effect that they owned up to this project, and that it is impossible that the HOD could have been acting alone in whatever he had done without either direction or direct instructions from the politicians.
So if I take you to page 2261, which is an email .
Yes.
Okay, tell us about this email.
This email was sent by Advocate Celia to myself, in which she says, "Dear SHS, those were my, that was short for my full name, Spelo Hamilton Samuel. We have finished the report and are starting the Section 79 letters. We are making findings of maladministration against the Premier and MEC, therefore three notices and one discretionary notice for the SIU. We took out remedial action for the Auditor General and Auditor General Free State is already busy with audit and the project. CISA and I met him and his team on Friday. Thanks, Erica."
Okay, and if you turn the page, there is a report attached. Was this the report you received from Advocate Celias?
That is correct.
And this report, if you look at 2263,
Yes.
is a report dated April 2017.
That's
Correct?
correct.
If you go to your affidavit at paragraph 150, you summarize some of the findings in the report. Can you talk to that, please?
Yes, I noted that the evidence showed that the Estina agreement was not concluded in accordance with the binding procurement framework, which constituted maladministration and the contravention of Section 217 of the Constitution, and that the rules regarding the public-private partnership which were applicable were not followed. The prices paid for the equipment, cows, and infrastructure was considerably higher than the market value. We concluded that the accounting officer was guilty of gross irregularity, maladministration, abuse of power, and improper conduct, as well as irregular expenditure. We found that amongst other things, he should not have paid over more than 143 million to Estina after the Accountant General's report, which raised significant concerns about the transaction. And furthermore, he had failed to put in place financial controls and risk management measures in respect of the project. And that in addition, there were no invoices or receipts to substantiate the expenditure claimed. Findings were also made against the Premier and the MC for their failure to institute disciplinary action against the senior officials responsible for the unlawful agreement in accordance with the Accountant General's recommendations, and that this constituted maladministration on their part. And the allegations that environmental legislation had been breached were not substantiated.
So if you go to page 2327 of annexure SS 15, you see the last sentence on paragraph 6.12. Is that the finding that the failure by the Premier and the MEC to institute disciplinary action amounts to maladministration?
Did you say 2327?
No, 2327, paragraph 6.1.2.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. And then if you go back to your affidavit at para 152, what happened with this report?
This report was circulated both within the Free State and to head office. And in addition, draft section 79 correspondence was sent to head office together with the certificate of compliance in respect of the investigation.
Just explain to us, what is that certificate of compliance?
The certificate of compliance was one of the requirements introduced by Advocate Mkhwebane, that we had to complete from the investigator assigned to do an investigation, his or her line manager, all the way up until the report gets to her for signature. That we had to comply with, to certify that we had observed all the requirements. We had stated all the facts and the law, and that our findings, are in line with what the complaint was and remedial action, everything, including certifying that the structure is in accordance with the directives and so on.
Right. So if I take you to annexure SS 16, it's at page 2333.
Yes, I'm there.
This is the email that contains the certificate of compliance. And then it refers to the section 79 letter. Who gets a section 79 letter?
All implicated parties against whom we make adverse findings should be sent the section 79 letters. In this case, it was Premier Mahashule, the HOD of the Free State Department of Agriculture, and the MEC of Agriculture at the time, Mr. Mkhwebane, and any other parties that we deemed fit to receive the report and would have to consider the remedial action. In this case, it was the SIU.
And so that you call a discretionary letter.
Yes, that is a discretionary letter as opposed to a section 79 notice, because we're not making adverse findings against them.
Now, Mr. Samuel, how did you get these emails?
In the emails relating to
Now,
these, or emails general.
no, the emails which refers to all the documentation, because you say in your report you don't have you can't locate a copy of the email to which the report was annexed. Mr. Samuel, when you left the PP's office, did you have all these emails?
No, I did not.
So how did you get these emails?
Oh, the emails were recovered by the evidence leaders and sent to me to have a look and see if I could assist this committee when looking at those emails in relation to what I had stated in my affidavit.
And did you get a copy of the email to which the report was attached?
No, I didn't.
And was the emails that was provided to you all your emails?
No. When I was suspended, my laptop was taken. But prior to that, a day before that, I had been completely blocked from the ICT infrastructure. And so when my laptop was confiscated, that was the last time I had, an opportunity to access my emails. And not all the emails were there amongst those that were recovered by the evidence leaders. Because some of the glaring example is that between March, after the public protector's visit to the Free State on the road, during the road show, I was requested to go and manage and do an investigation in the Gauteng provincial office. None of those emails relating to my work there, and were amongst those, and there were quite a number of others that I wanted, that I had a recollection on, that were not recovered.
Okay. Now, if you turn to Annexure SS 17 at page 2334. There's an email at the bottom from Advocate Matlawi at the bottom of the page. All right. Where he says, "Dear PP, I have looked at the attached letter, specifically the one addressed to the MEC, and made appropriate comments. I'm not sure why all the letters are marked discretionary notices. In fact, the only discretionary notice should be a letter addressed to the complainant, which to me seems from the way it was drafted. The letter to the SIU should rather be a cover letter to the Section 79 notice addressed to the HOD. Since the SIU is not implicated, it's technically incorrect to address a 79 notice directly to it," and says, "I await your guidance."
Yes,
You are included in that email,
that is correct.
right? And then there's a further email sent, which is if you go up on the page, on the 22nd of May, where he says, I've in fact not attached the section 7(I) notice addressed to the HOD as I had intended. And then he attaches the documentation which says new corrected draft MEC, new corrected draft SIU, new corrected draft Premier, complaint document, and new corrected draft HOD. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And the PP is included in both emails.
That is correct.
Now, what follows in the annexures of 7, the next page of SS 18, is a request from Advocate Matlawe to the PP asking for her to approval and signature of Section 7(I) notices.
Yes.
And then if you turn the page to SS 19, one sees the letter that is prepared for the Premier, correct?
That is correct.
And if you turn to page 2357, at 10.1.3, can you read that?
The paragraph reads, the Accountant General's report found that the PPP was irregular and recommended that the Premier and the then MEC institute disciplinary action against the HOD and the then Chief Financial Officer, Ms. S. Lamini. The failure by the Premier and the MEC to institute disciplinary action amounts to maladministration.
And so that last sentence, which you've now read, Mr. Samuel, I referred you earlier on to the paragraph in the April report, paragraph 6.1.2 at page 2327. If we can just go back there. Which is the end of paragraph 6.12.
Yes.
This was the section 7(9) was issued pursuant to the April 2017 findings in the report.
That is correct.
Is that correct? And you also find the further, well, we'll get to that in a moment. And if you go to SS 20, which is on page 2363,
yes.
right? That's the signed letter that goes off from the PP's office to the Premier, correct?
That is correct.
And if you look at page 2388, you see her signature on that on 7th June 2017.
That is correct.
Right? And if you go back to page 2383 of the letter.
Yes, I'm there.
You see the finding at the bottom of the failure by the Premier and the MEC to institute disciplinary action amounts to maladministration.
That is correct.
And so, Mr. Samuel, when the litigation ensued in respect of the Vrede report, where was the record and the documentation in respect of the Vrede report?
Our whole file, which contains the record, was at head office. It was sent to head office by the direction. I can't recall whether it was of the PP or the unit that was to consider the whole report. But our file was no longer with us in the Free State.
And what was your involvement in the compilation of the Rule 53 record?
None whatsoever.
Right. And what was your involvement in the preparation of affidavits for purposes of opposing the relief or putting an affidavit before court?
I had no right. I did not make any contribution to that.
And so we provided you with a copy of the Rule 53 record index, correct?
That is correct.
And that index is SF21 to your affidavit at 2389.
That is so.
And
Maybe if you can pause there, Advocate Bauer. We'll just take a tea break for 15 minutes and be back at 1:45. We'll take a break, Mr. Samuel, and everybody in the virtual will be back at 11:45. In the meantime, Timogosi, there's a complaint about it's a bit cold here, so fix that. I got that.